Makes us see a lot of the truth and laugh at things we wouldn't normally laugh at. I think that's part of what you're doing. I think so. What do you think that these executives are afraid you're going to do to white America?
Probably stop some racism.
Stop racism?
Trying to get this beacon scan so I can actually go ahead and make sure that oh shit. Oh, this I did scan it. All right, so let's continue on the next video. So
there's a secret method that forces banks to...
We're going to do something different right now. And the different that we're going to actually do is we're going to actually talk about economic shit, right? It's been a while since I did a video like this, and I'm sorry guys that I haven't been like focused on it, like pandemic and shit, and like every week I try to actually do a video on Professor Wolf's his normal what the fuck is that called, his weekly roundup. And I just I want to be frank with you guys. I just run through so much content. But let's go to this video where we can actually go ahead and just talk about like stealing from the next generation and the biggest wealth gap that the wealth transfer that we've actually seen in history. So let's get it started.
45, the Allies won World War II, and the United States was left as one of the only manufacturing centres in the world that was not reduced to rubble. This led to one of the longest periods of sustained economic prosperity in history, as American industry rapidly improved the lives of a new wave of middle-class workers.
So, it's the common narratives that we actually saw, we know happened throughout history, and quite frankly, that we benefited immensely from. After World War II, we bombed the shit out of Europe. We bombed the shit out of Japan. Literally, we dropped 2 nukes on them. And a lot of places were damaged, and the manufacturer were damaged due to World War II. That led to our mostly untouched industries, and I say mostly untouched, but like we basically had the run in the run of manufacturers. That's why we saw a lot of the middle class actually seceding, where other countries had to deal with rebuilding. So let's continue.
This all coincided with a massive spike in birth rates, because, well, people had lived through years of grueling conflict and they were ready to start families. The generation formed by this boom in new babies needed a name, but the jury's still out on what that will be. Generational naming conventions aside, these post-war babies are
nice little joke there, but let's continue.
Coming up against some harsh realities. Sad guarantees in life are death and taxes. We will actually cover both of those here, but the important one for now is that the wealthiest generation in history is starting to retire and die. In doing so, they will be responsible for the largest wealth transfer in history, as they pass along a collective $30 trillion to their beneficiaries over the next few decades in the
damn. Let's continue.
United States alone. That kind of capital movement is going to have some extremely significant impacts on the economy, some of which we are already starting to feel. So, what is actually being passed along? Will this stuff maintain its value in the hands of its new owners? Should we tax it? And finally, how might this actually be a huge economic problem? This episode of Economics Explained was made possible by Acorns, an investment app that automatically rounds up your...
Okay, let's not hear the commercial. Yeah, I'm just trying to make it to this terminal. Let's continue. And look, a fucking commercial after the commercial. Well, let's continue.
Properly addressing and managing the transfer of a generation's wealth could be the make or break for an economy. If it is not handled correctly, it could genuinely see assets and businesses go without the stewardship they relied on under their previous owners. But to give context to this whole issue, it is important to understand first what is being passed down. The collective value of...
So let's hear. Like, of course, there are a lot of people who are baby boomers who are no longer with us, and with COVID-19, of course, that number is accelerating at a very dangerous rate. But let's hear more.
Expected inheritance over the next few decades are by some estimates approaching $100 trillion worldwide. This worldwide figure is a little bit less concrete and a lot harder to reliably quantify than the USA, where records tend to be a little bit more rigid. In the US, the number that we are looking at is $30 trillion, of which about $9 trillion is in the form of typical liquid and semi-liquid assets. This is stuff like cash, cars, boats, Beanie Baby collections, share portfolios, and...
It's just amazing of how people would put value into shit that they don't sell, but it's speculative, yeah. And $9 trillion. But let's continue.
And houses. All of this money changing hands is bound to give a boost to the wallets of a younger generation, which has famously been saddled with economic headwinds like student loan debts, stagnant wages, and turbulent job markets. You might be forgiven for thinking this is great. It is finally going to give millennials the healthy financial boost that they need to get into homes or unsaddle themselves of debt or just become bigger spenders in the economy. And while there are definitely going to be some good things that come from this transfer, it may not all be good news. But from the top, the first impact this will have is an upwards pressure on demand. A paper published by the American Economic Review found that around 70% of households who received an inheritance windfall had spent all of the money within the space of 5 years.
Wow, it's almost as if when you give people money that they've been struggling with their majority of their adult life, they spend the shit. Wow. But let's continue.
This is obviously terrible financial management on their behalf, but for the wider economy, that frivolous spending will create jobs and business opportunities for people, probably people in the jet ski industry. And it is worth quickly noting that this paper and its findings are old. It was originally published in 1959 and then revised in 1961. But since then, consumers' marginal propensity to consume has only risen, meaning that for every extra dollar people are receiving, they are spending a larger portion of it rather than saving. Also, more recent but less comprehensive studies are still finding the same figures. This is an interesting phenomenon, and there are a few things to pull apart from these transfers. For starters,
so I guess what he's saying is like, oh yeah, when they get the money, they spend it. It's almost if you put hands in the needy, they spend it and let it circulate through the economy. But let's continue.
smaller inheritances are more likely to be squandered. Now, obviously, it is easier to spend less money than it is to spend up more money, but it actually has more to do with what this money can do. An inheritance of less than $100,000 is not necessarily life-changing for most US citizens. Don't get me wrong, it's a lot of money, but it won't let the average person quit their job, and it probably won't accommodate a house purchase either. Of course, $100,000 would be a healthy deposit for a house pretty much anywhere in the world, but it would still be up to the recipient of this inheritance to qualify for financing for the remainder of the purchase price. An asset-based inheritance may give some injection of cash, but it doesn't increase the recipient's income or polish up their credit score, so oftentimes it's difficult to deploy this capital effectively, at least for use in buying a home.
Now, what about the people who aren't left anything? I'm sorry, let's continue.
Of course, the relatively financially savvy viewers that make up the audience of an economics-based YouTube channel will probably point out alternative investments like the stock market. And this is not a bad plan, but in reality, most average people are scared of investing directly into shares. A 2016 Gallup poll noted that only around 25% of Americans are directly invested into shares outside of things like their 401k and their Roth IRAs. Now, considering the median inheritance in the USA is actually only $69,000, it is reasonable to expect that a lot of this money will be squandered rather than deployed into investments that will increase the standard of living for the recipients long term. Another important point to note is that while the median inheritance size is $69,000, the average inheritance size is $700,000. What this means is that a large majority of this wealth transfer is coming from and going to wealthy households.
Wow. Wow. That is so fucking telling. Excuse me, guys. For you to actually sit back and actually think about that, it's almost as if the numbers are skewed in the direction of the rich. Damn. Let's continue.
Now, for the more regular recipients, there is one other option available to handle this cash, and that is paying off debt. The average student loan debt in the USA is $32,731 as of 2019, according to the Federal Reserve Bank. This is ignoring consumer debt. A financial windfall like this might just motivate people to pay out debt, which on an individual level is probably pretty responsible, but economy-wide, it means no consumption and no investment, which makes GDP figures sad. Yep, this is all ignoring the big elephant in the room.
So, that's actually a very good keep. So what it's actually saying is, because inheritances are smaller, there are no life-changing things that happens. And in a lot of cases, people are just using to pay up debt. It's almost as if, like, we go into a global pandemic and, you know, the government throws a pitiful $1,200 out to everyone, and people who lost their jobs, whose bills are more than fucking $1,200 a month, that money doesn't go to buy shit, it goes to eat up fucking debt. And then there is some stimulus, you know. But, you know, mostly to fucking eat up debt that people are basically living on. But let's continue.
So far, we have only looked at a paltry $9 trillion worth of this wealth transfer. Now, this $9 trillion comes from pretty much any asset type that you can slap a price tag on, so it begs the question, where is the remaining $21 trillion coming from? Well, it's coming from a vast collection of private companies. Private companies, those are businesses that are incorporated but not publicly listed, make up a majority of wealth held by individuals over the age of 65. These businesses can be anything from a family restaurant to Coke Industries, but it tends to be that business owners control a larger portion of wealth. Another quick side note is that this figure includes trusts. Trusts are an effective way to disperse assets to beneficiaries before and after the death of an individual that is contributing to these entities. I will leave a link in the description to
Oh, great. So it's just really made up money. Like, that's literally what it is. It's literally just made up money. Because it's speculative values of companies. Oh, great. Yeah. Let's continue.
video that properly describes the ins and outs of trust structures, but in short, they are basically just buckets of assets with designated managers which control the money for the benefit of, well, the beneficiaries. These entities are particularly popular amongst wealthy individuals because it means that they can give money to their children while leaving something like a law firm in charge of actually managing the money. This means that they can set rules and limitations about how the money is accessed and used, like they can only draw a certain amount per year, or the beneficiary needs to get a college degree to access the money, or whatever weird and wonderful stipulations rich people come up with to control their children beyond the grave. All of this is, of course, why wealthy children get the title of a trust fund baby. But wealth inequality argument aside, trust funds and trust fund babies are not necessarily the problem here. It's more so the genuine businesses that are out there functioning day to day. Imagine an auto mechanic shop. A majority of the value of that business will come from its ability to actually fix cars.
So another reason why reason number 375 is that we should eat the rich is because, you know, a lot of the parents are so controlling that they literally try to control their children from the grave in order for the children to give money. Yeah, let's continue.
If this business gets passed along, there will be no guarantee that the beneficiaries of the previous proprietor will be technically proficient in auto repairs. In this very simple example, what that would mean is that this business would lose a good portion of its value. Now, for larger businesses, it's relatively simple to put employees into place that can handle the day-to-day operations, but it still can be very destabilizing when an owner leaves the business. Put it like this. How many examples are there out there of businesses that have been successfully run by a CEO after they were promoted into that role from their previous position as son of the CEO? Of course, successful handovers do happen, but reputations exist for a reason.
It's almost as if, say if your father was Fred Trump and you were a loser and a baby, and your businesses go bankrupt 6 fucking times, you may be a horrible leader. And because of your leadership, I don't know, more than 200,000 people actually die from what admittedly can be a harsh but preventable, disease. But, trust fund babies, right?
Reason, a US Census Bureau study found that 2/3 of family businesses do not survive the transition from the first generation to the second. Of those that do survive, only about 50% make it to the third generation. Even for people that don't have a lovely family business coming their way, this is a real concern. Family-run, small to medium-sized enterprises made up about 50% of the USA's gross national product in 2019.
Oh, God, with the pandemic, that's probably less.
In many other countries around the world, this figure is even higher. If 50% of these businesses go bust, that will mean job losses, productivity losses, and supply chain problems for the entire world. Now, of course, there will be businesses that come in and replace the businesses that shut down, but these transitions are not always as smooth as the perfect little economic assumptions that we make. Structural inefficiencies are going to be a major concern during the post-boomer boom. Now, with so much at stake, the logical question is to ask, how is this all being managed?
Very poorly, but let's continue.
Or more specifically, how is this being taxed? Most developed nations in the world today have some form of estate tax that is levied on the passing down of assets. This includes the United States, where there is a federal tax of 40% that is charged for estates over the value of $11.68 million. Of course, given this high value, the charges don't apply to 99.9% of inheritances.
And he's making an actually very point right here. The point of the fact that Republicans ran a campaign against what the estate tax, calling it the death tax. You get taxed on money even after you're dead. But the fact that most people aren't affected by it, why the fuck should somebody who's never going to be a millionaire, who's never going to be a billionaire, give a fuck about these whiny, bitchy little trust fund babies that are so upset that they can't have all daddy's money or mommy's money when they die? I have a good example of a motherfucker that should not have gotten mommy's money. He ended up buying him a sand dolphin, and it's been eating him out of house and home. But let's continue.
But for those that do, those charges can be pretty steep. Multi-million-dollar estates are more likely to involve some kind of family business, which raises the question of accelerating the problems that we saw earlier. If a business is struggling through a leadership transition, the last thing that they will need is for Uncle Sam to stick his hand out and ask for 40% of their value paid out in cash. This may very well force the beneficiaries to just sell the business off to cover the tax burden, which will again cause business turmoil. An entire industry has actually grown around this, where institutions like insurance companies will offer policies to cover this estate tax burden. Beyond this, it must be recognised that the actual valuations given to family companies can be pretty fluid. More often than not, these institutions are valued lower than they probably should be for reporting purposes.
Almost as if, you're a retail, not retail, fucking, a realty land management company, and you devalue your properties like Mar-a-Lago or golf farms or, shit like that, and because you want to try to avoid taxes. But nah, we don't know anybody that's stupid enough to know that we can actually see him doing that and still do it anyway. Let's continue.
Even more to the point, an $11 million family business would likely have some kind of succession plan in place with pre-existing employees in executive positions. Now, the argument for an estate tax is that sure, it might cause turbulence in these large institutions during a transition phase, but that can be planned for, even if it means taking on a loan, selling some shares in the business, or, let's be honest, sitting down with an estate lawyer and jumping through some loopholes. This tax provides strong revenue from people that can, of course, afford it, while also reducing the tax burden on smaller businesses or regular folks that might only get a few $1,000s in their trust fund. A best of both worlds approach has been presented as just taxing businesses more during their regular operations to avoid the massive disturbances that come from this transition period. But let us all know what you think the best way for governments.
So, this whole libertarian idea, or neoliberal idea of, well, no, just let the, and he said it, that so many of these businesses fail when you go from owner to child. And, God damn it. I get it. I'm fucking part of the capitalist system. I totally get it. But it's just like a lot of these motherfuckers just, they are so caught up in their own, like, it saves us money, so we need to do this shit. Well, let's continue.
To handle the great wealth transfer will be in the comment section below. As always, we will discuss the most upvoted answer in this week's Q&A. Until then, we can rest easy knowing that estate taxes are doing exactly what wealthy business owners want them to do, taxing them over their dead bodies.
OFX does have
All right, guys. So